In this video, I'm going to show you how to install a hot water tank fast and easy. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. The channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. The water heater that I'm going to be installing is a 50-gallon water heater, and it's an electric water heater, and it's going to be sitting right on the floor in this pan. And this is a drain pan that's going to catch any leaks that might come from this water heater eventually. So it's very important that you place a pan underneath of the water heater. And this pan's made by Eastman. It's a sister company to SharkBite, which is under RWC. SharkBite is the sponsor of today's video. Using these SharkBite fittings, we're going to be able to connect this water heater to our water lines extremely fast. So I highly recommend that you get SharkBite fittings for your installation. And if you'd like to check out any of these products, I'll put a link to them in the description below. And if this was a gas water heater, we would want to set it up on a stand. And this stand is 18 inches up off the ground. Because this is electric, I don't need this stand, but this is made by Eastman as well. And again, if you want to check it out, check out the links in the description. In order to prep this drain pan, we must install this PVC fitting. This came with the drain pan. You can install 1.5-inch pipe over it or inch pipe in it. We're going to go with installing inch pipe inside of it for our drain. In order to install this, we remove this lock nut and we keep the washer, this rubber washer that's on the fitting on it. Then we're going to place this through the back and then tighten the lock nut onto the fitting, and that's going to give us a seal against the pan. All right, the pan is now prepped. In the corner of this laundry room is where we are installing the hot water tank, and we are installing a wall here at some point after the installation. Just so you know, that's why these water lines are sticking up right here. It's to make the video recording process much easier without that wall there, and so you can see what's going on. What we have here is a junction box where a 10-2 wire from the panel box is going, and then we junction it here and have a whip that is conduit that's flexible that's going to go down to the water heater. This 10-2 wire is on a double 30 breaker, and that's going to give us sufficient amperage for this water heater. For the water lines, these two are stubbed up through the floor. They are 3/4 inch water lines, and they happen to be CPVC. They could also be PEX or copper for that matter, but these are what's going to be used for this installation. If your water heater was going to be installed to PEX, typically the hot, which is right here, would be red, and then blue would be the cold, just so you know. But since this is CPVC, they're both white. I'm going to address the drain pan first. When placing the drain pan, we want to turn it to the area in which we got to get the drain to go through the floor. Right here is going to be our best bet. So we're going to have to line this up where we want it before we drill a hole back here in this corner. I'm installing an elbow here, so this elbow's down through the floor like so. So I need to get a small piece of pipe to connect these two together. But before I do that, I'm going to mark the floor where I need to drill my hole first. I need to drill it out right here. Using an 1.25-inch hole saw, I'm going to drill out the hole for this 1-inch pipe right where we marked it on the floor. I cut a 2-inch piece that's going to glue right into this elbow. This is what's going to go right through the floor. And then we're going to glue this right onto the fitting. And we have what's called PVC cement and primer here. And that's what we're going to use to make our connections. First going to prime here, then prime inside of the fitting. We'll place glue in the fitting and glue on the pipe. Then we push and twist to make our connection. And do that at all the connections. If there is a leak, water will catch in this pan and go through the drain pipe down to the crawl space. We can now set the drain pan into place and make sure our drain pipe goes through that hole. And we're ready to set our hot water tank here onto this pan. When placing the hot water tank into place, you want to make sure that the elements are facing towards you so you can access them later if you have to. That looks really good right there. Before making the water line connections, I'm going to install what's called an expansion tank. The expansion tank is going to sit on the cold water side of the hot water tank, and this is made by Eastman. And also Eastman makes what's called an expansion tank T, which is really nice because we're going to install this right on top of the tank, and then that can be installed on top of the T, or we can also install it on the side of the T. Either one's fine. So that's going to make it easy to install an expansion tank with the hot water tank. And this is something that's going to be needed because whenever cold water comes into a tank, it expands, and then you need a place for that volume to go. So this is going to absorb it. Some places these are code, some places they are not. In my area, I found it's best to install these, so that's why we're going to install this in this video. These are the parts that will come with the T. To install this, it's very simple. We place this piece through here, and then we place our rubber washer down into here, and then we simply tighten our T onto that. We need to make sure that washer stays in the center, and this creates a union here. And now we're going to make sure, again, we're right in the center. That looks good. And we're going to give that a little tighten that we were started. Something I'd like to mention, the nipples coming up out of this tank are called dielectric nipples, and these are code in our area. They must be installed on the tank. So because these are already installed, I don't have to install these after the fact. Some hot water tanks, I do have to install the dielectric nipples first before installing the tank, just so you know. In order to prep this, I'm going to take Teflon tape and wrap around the threads going clockwise about 4 or 5 times, enough to get a good layer on, and before we install the pipe dope. Using pipe thread sealant, some people call this pipe dope, we're going to put a layer of it right around that Teflon. This gives us an extra layer of protection, and whenever you're threading the brass onto these nipples, it's going to act as semi-lubricant, so that way they thread on a little easier. I'm going to thread the T onto the nipple. At this stage, I could take my pipe wrench and tighten this bottom piece onto the tank, but a better option is going to be take this union apart and then get our regular wrench on from there. Now I'm going to replace that washer and then put our union nut back up and then re-thread this back on. We're just going to snug this up for now. To prep the expansion tank, same idea, Tef tape first, then the pipe dope second. To install the expansion tank, it's just going to thread right on top of this T. And again, if you're going out of the side, you'd want to thread this in to the opening on the side. Now that I got on hand tight, we're going to take 2 wrenches, grab this, then grab that, then we're going to tighten it up even further. The expansion tank is now installed onto the T. In order to connect the supply flex hoses to the T, we must install this double male-ended 3/4 fitting. And it's going to thread right into here. And we first must prep this with Teflon tape and pipe dope as well. This now gives me an area to install the SharkBite supply lines to the T. Because this is a new construction house, we left these water lines up at this height so we can cut and adjust them where we need them before we install the supply lines off the hot water tank. So now that we're setting into place, we can cut them to where we need them. We're going to be installing the SharkBite Max supply lines. And with the SharkBite Max fittings, these are great because they can handle more PSI compared to the first generation SharkBite. They also slide on easier to the water lines. They have a 25-year warranty, so they're considered a permanent install. So we're going to go ahead and decide where we want to cut these and install these. Because of the length of the supply line, we're actually going to turn this T this way. And then we're going to install this to where it flexes around and intercepts into the line here. So we're going to cut and elbow this water line towards this T, and we're also going to do the same on the hot side. If you're wondering why the pipes were not plumbed up through the wall behind the tank, that's because that's an exterior wall, and we tried to avoid running water lines in exterior walls to reduce the risk of freezing and bursting pipes. To install the SharkBite flexible supply lines, we simply have a rubber compression fitting on this end that we're going to thread onto this nipple. And the great thing about these, you don't have to use Teflon tape or pipe dope for the installation because there's a rubber washer right in here and it works great. So we're just going to thread this onto this nipple and then tighten it with our wrench. I'm first going to hand tighten it onto the hot water tank. And after we got it hand tightened on, take our adjustable wrench to tighten it up even further. All right, that was easy. Now we put our shark bite and flex this down where we need it. Flexing this towards our water line for the hot side. That looks pretty good and comfortable. You can see we can cut a lot off this and we're going to be totally fine, so we're going to trim this down some. For a comfortable fit, I'm going to cut the pipe right here. This is the Shark Bite Max deburring tool. This is for 1-inch pipe, 3/4 or 1/2 inch. This is for the Max. Then this is for the first generation Shark Bites. We're going to want to use this side whenever we go to mark, but we need to deburr this pipe. Very important step to using the Shark Bite Max fittings or the first generation Shark Bites. We slide this over the CPVC pipe. You would do the same for PEX, and then we would turn this until we deburr the end really well. And you can see that gave us a slight tapered edge. That looks really good. We're going to slide this back on using the 3/4 measurement for the 3/4 pipe. We're going to hold that tight to the pipe and then mark right here on the CPVC to give us our insertion depth. So now when we slide it on, it'll know it's on all the way given the line. To install the Shark Bite Max fitting, really easy. Pushes on. That went on really smooth. I like that. Using the Shark Bite Max fitting with the shutoff valve on it, we're going to install this one on the cold water side. We're going to thread it right onto this fitting. And again, we don't need any Teflon tape or pipe dope here because we have our rubber washer inside of the compression fitting. And after we install this, we're going to hook right here to our CPVC on the cold water side. And then the little note here, we're going to do some flexing to get this to come in to where we want it. And also this can pivot. Then once we get everything hooked up, we're going to tighten down that union fitting just to re-secure everything and make sure it's watertight, just so you know. That flexes around there really easy and smooth. I like that. All right, we're now going to install our Shark Bite onto the CPVC. First going to deburr the pipe, mark the insertion depth, make our connection, boom, done. Another great thing about these supply lines by Shark Bite, you can pivot the Shark Bite and it does not hurt them at all. So if you need to pivot it to get to the shutoff valve easier, you can. In order to operate this, very straightforward. We turn it this way clockwise in order to turn it off, counterclockwise to turn it back on. So that looks good where it's at. Using a pipe wrench or a pair of channel locks, we're going to tighten up this nut to secure the T into place now that everything's connected. This is what's called a TP valve. It stands for temperature pressure release valve. This one's preset at 150 pounds PSI. So if we have a buildup of pressure over that, the pressure is going to release water coming out of this valve, and it needs a place to go if that does happen. Because we installed the expansion tank, it's going to help alleviate that issue, but if it does, it needs somewhere to go. That's where we got to install what's called a runoff tube, and this is made by Eastman. And we're just going to thread it right into this valve and go through the floor down to the crawl space, so if it does overflow, it has somewhere to go. We're just going to plumb down beside this valve and mark on the floor where to drill it out at, and then it's going to go right through the floor. Just going to plumb down. You could also use a plumb bob here and hold it right in the center, then mark the floor. I'm just going to use a 4-foot level and get it plumb. That looks good. And then come over about 1/2 inch and mark on the floor. Then we're going to do it from this angle. Now that we got it marked on the floor where it's going to go, we're going to drill it out using a 7/8 paddle bit to go right through the floor. I'm going to place the paddle bit right in the center of where the tube must go through the floor. We're going to drill it out going straight. I'm now going to place the runoff tube down through that hole. For this end, we're going to place Tef tape around the threads before we install it into the TP valve. We now just hand tighten this into the valve. That's all there is to installing the runoff tube. If you're enjoying this type of content, then you'll definitely want to check out the Excellent Labor course membership. Get instant access to all the DIY courses and downloads for just $5 a month at the time of this recording. And the best part, the library is growing, but your price won't if you lock it in today. Check out the link in the description to get started. Now that our plumbing is addressed, we're going to address the electrical. If you're not comfortable with working on electrical and making your connections, be sure to hire an electrician. I'm first going to go to the panel box to double check to make sure the breaker's turned off. And in fact, before even touching this area, make sure this breaker's turned off because this wire could be live. So always double check to make sure there's no juice going to your electrical. So we're going to go to the panel box to do that. Here at the panel box, I'm going to open it up. Make sure we locate hot water heater on this ledger. Come down here, it's the bottom one, and we are off. So we need to double check that at the hot water tank. To double check the wire, I like to use a non-contact voltage tester and test the wire to make sure there's no power. I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to touch the wire, and there is no power here. So that's good. We confirm there is no power to this wire before working on it. Here is the junction box where our connections are going to be made. We need to remove these two screws in order to access the box. Using this end of the screwdriver, I'm going to remove these screws. On this, we need to remove this locking nut. We're then going to slide the wires through here. And now slide the nut right over those wires and place it back onto this connector. To address the ground, I can clip this down to be a little shorter here. And now I'm going to place a hook on the end of this ground wire. I'm going to slide that right around that ground screw. Then we're going to tighten the screw down to make a strong connection for our ground. Make sure you snug it up really well. And make sure the copper wire goes on in this direction so when you tighten it, it pulls the wire towards the screw. We're now going to reinstall this plate, replace the screws. I'm going to tie together the black to the black, then the red to the white. I like to use my alignments here and twist them together first before using a wire nut. After twisting them together, I will place a wire nut onto them to hold them together. I'm now going to do the same to the red and the white. I'm now going to take electrical tape and wrap around each one of those wire nuts. I'm now going to place the wires down into the box so they're out of the way of the cover. Remove this screw. Now clip it right into that other section and then push it down. Then replace the screw. Our connections are made, and now we need to make sure this fills up with water before turning the breaker back on, so we're definitely not going to do that yet. Now that all of our connections are made, our electrical's hooked up, our water lines are hooked up, our runoff tube's hooked up, our drain pan is hooked up. Now what? We need to make sure that we match the pressure of the water lines and put that pressure in this expansion tank. So the water's not on in this house yet, but if it was, we would take our manometer and hook it to our outside spigot to get a pressure. And then after we do that, we take the top off this and use a air hose and put the same amount of pressure through this valve stem into this expansion tank. If the pressure is less, then this is going to fill up with water and not capture any fluctuations in pressure. And if it's more, it's not going to capture what it should. So you definitely need to match the pressure of your water lines and place that in the expansion tank. You also, like I mentioned already, you need to make sure water fills up inside of this tank before turning the breaker on. If you do turn the breaker on, it's going to burn the elements up and you're going to change out elements right away. So you're not going to want to do that. So make sure you fill this up with water first. I'd like to go over a couple of things about this water heater. We have an element here, which is considered the upper element. Then we have our lower element. And we also have our hose bib for draining the tank. If you ever have to drain the tank for whatever reason, let's say you got to replace an element, you would hook your water hose here, run the water hose to the outside, turn the breaker off to the water heater, then crack this valve and it's going to drain the water out, and make sure you turn the water off to the upper part as well, so that way you don't have water coming into your water heater. Then you would drain it, then replace your elements. So I'm going to open this up and show you what's on the inside of each compartment for the elements. To access the element, we're going to remove this Phillips screw here at the top at each compartment. Pull back this insulation and lift it up, and you're going to notice we have a thermostat here, and we also have our element underneath here, and it's protected by this plastic flap. So if you ever have to remove it, here's where you would remove it from. But let's hope you don't have to do that anytime soon. And right here is where you adjust your temperature. Typically you keep your temperatures at the top and bottom element the same. Right now we're set at about 120-ish, and that looks good. So I just wanted to show you what's inside of here. I'm now going to place the cover back over the element. I'd like to show you this other product called a Tank Booster Pro. And what this does, it's going to mount right here on the hot water side from this point, and this section is going to mount to the cold water side. And it's a thermostatic mixing valve. And what it's going to do is help conserve hot water. So if you notice you're going through your hot water really quick, it might be worth checking out this tank booster. This might save you a lot of money in the long run with hot water. So that's going to be something I'll put a link in the description to if you want to check it out for yourself. If you'd like to see how I installed this toilet, check out this video. It'll help you out.